Marcus Thornfield looked at himself in the large mirror of his bedroom. His expensive suit fit perfectly. His watch cost more than most people made in a year. He smiled at his reflection. Tonight would be another perfect evening to show everyone how successful he was. The mansion was ready for the dinner party. 30 guests would arrive soon. These were important people, business owners, politicians, and celebrities. Marcus loved these parties. He loved showing off his wealth and making sure everyone knew he was better than them. Elena Rodriguez finished cleaning the last wine glass in the kitchen. She had been working since early morning to prepare for this party. Her back hurt from all the cleaning and cooking. Her uniform was perfectly pressed, but she felt tired. She had worked for Marcus for 6 months now. Every day was the same. He treated her like she was nothing. "Elena!" Marcus shouted from the dining room. "Come here now!" Elena walked quickly to where Marcus stood. He was checking the table settings with a frown on his face. "This fork is in the wrong place," Marcus said, pointing at the table. "How many times do I have to tell you? The salad fork goes on the outside. Are you stupid?" Elena's face turned red. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thornfield. I'll fix it right away." "You better fix it. My guests expect perfection. They don't want to see mistakes from the help." Marcus watched as Elena moved the fork to the correct position. "And make sure you stay in the kitchen tonight. Only come out when I call you. I don't want you embarrassing me in front of important people." Elena nodded and went back to the kitchen. She had heard these words many times before. Marcus never missed a chance to remind her that she was just a maid. He seemed to enjoy making her feel small. But Marcus didn't know the truth about Elena. He didn't know that she once wore beautiful dresses and performed on stage. He didn't know that her fingers once danced across piano keys in front of hundreds of people. He didn't know that she had studied at one of the best music schools in the world. Elena's father had been a famous pianist. He taught her to play when she was just 5 years old. "Music is magic, my little star," he used to say. "When you play, you can make people feel anything: happiness, sadness, love, hope." Elena remembered sitting next to her father at their old piano. His hands were gentle as he showed her how to press the keys. "Feel the music in your heart first," he would tell her. "Then let your fingers follow." By the time Elena was 18, she was accepted to Juilliard School of Music in New York. It was her dream come true. She was going to be a concert pianist, just like her father. She would travel the world and share her music with everyone. But dreams can break quickly. The car accident happened on a rainy night. Elena's father was driving home from a concert. A drunk driver ran a red light. Elena's father died instantly. Elena's world fell apart that night. Her mother became very sick with cancer soon after. Elena had to leave music school to take care of her. All the money went to doctors and hospitals. Elena sold everything: her father's piano, her music books, even her jewelry. Nothing was enough. When her mother died 2 years later, Elena had nothing left. No money, no family, no home. She was 25 years old and completely alone. She moved from city to city, taking any job she could find. She cleaned offices, waited tables, and worked in factories. She never told anyone about her past. It hurt too much to remember. Now Elena was 28 and working as a maid for a man who treated her like dirt. She had not touched a piano in almost 3 years. Sometimes, late at night, she would move her fingers like she was playing piano. But there was no sound, no music, just the memory of what used to be. The doorbell rang. Marcus's guests were arriving. "Elena," Marcus called. "Get the door and take their coats. And remember, don't speak unless someone asks you a question. Just smile and do your job." Elena opened the large front door. A man and woman walked in, both wearing clothes that cost more than Elena made in 3 months. "Welcome," Elena said quietly, taking their coats. More guests arrived. Elena recognized some faces from magazines and TV shows. These people lived in a different world from hers. They talked about their vacation homes, their expensive cars, and their successful businesses. Marcus was in his element. He moved from group to group, telling stories about his latest business deals. He laughed loudly and made sure everyone knew how much money he had made that week. "Did you see my new painting?" Marcus asked a group of guests, pointing to a large artwork on the wall. "It cost $500,000. The artist is very famous in Europe." The guests made impressed sounds. Some took pictures with their phones. Elena served drinks and small appetizers. She moved quietly around the room, trying to be invisible. But Marcus always found ways to make her feel uncomfortable. "Elena, tell Mr. Johnson what you were doing before you came to work for me," Marcus said with a mean smile. Elena felt her face get hot. I worked in different places, sir." "She's being modest," Marcus laughed. "She was probably cleaning toilets somewhere, right, Elena?" The guests laughed along with Marcus. Elena wanted to disappear. She wanted to tell them all about her real past, about the music, about her father. But she said nothing. She needed this job. She had to eat and pay rent. "Don't worry, Elena," Marcus continued. "You're much better at serving drinks than whatever you did before. At least here you can learn from successful people." Elena bit her lip and continued working. She had learned to ignore Marcus's cruel words. But tonight felt different. Maybe it was because there were so many people watching. Maybe it was because she was extra tired. Or maybe it was because she had been thinking about her father more lately. Dinner was served in the large dining room. Elena and the other staff brought out course after course of expensive food. Marcus made sure to point out how much everything cost. He talked about the chef he had hired, the rare wine he was serving, and the gold-plated silverware on the table. "Money can buy the best of everything," Marcus announced to his guests. "Good food, good wine, good art, good music. If you have enough money, you can have anything you want." Elena was standing by the wall, waiting to clear the plates. When Marcus mentioned music, she felt a sharp pain in her chest. She remembered her father's words. "Music isn't something you can buy, Elena. Music comes from the soul." The guests finished eating and moved back to the living room. Elena began cleaning the dining room table. She could hear Marcus's loud voice from the other room, still bragging about his wealth. Elena picked up the expensive wine glasses carefully. Each one cost more than she made in a week. As she worked, she noticed something through the doorway. In the living room stood a beautiful black piano. It was a Steinway grand piano, one of the best pianos in the world. Elena stopped cleaning and stared at the piano. She had not seen one this beautiful in years. Her fingers began to move slightly, remembering old songs. For just a moment, she forgot where she was. She forgot about Marcus and his cruel words. She forgot about being a maid. She remembered being a musician. Marcus noticed her looking at the piano. A mean smile appeared on his face. Elena didn't know it yet, but Marcus was getting an idea that would change both of their lives forever. Marcus walked back into the living room with a big smile on his face. He had finished his expensive dinner and several glasses of wine. The alcohol made him feel even more confident than usual. His guests were sitting around, talking and laughing. But Marcus wanted more attention. He always wanted to be the center of everything. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus said loudly, clapping his hands together, "I have an idea for some entertainment." All the guests turned to look at him. Marcus loved this feeling, having everyone's eyes on him, waiting to see what he would do next. Victoria, Marcus's girlfriend, smiled from her seat on the expensive leather couch. She was used to Marcus's games. She thought they were funny, even when they hurt other people. Victoria came from a rich family, too. She had never worked a real job in her life. "What kind of entertainment?" asked Mr. Johnson, a fat man who owned several restaurants. Marcus walked over to his beautiful black piano. He ran his hand along the shiny surface. "Well, I have this wonderful piano. It cost me $200,000. But I don't play it myself," the guests murmured appreciatively. They were impressed by the price, just like Marcus wanted them to be. "So I was thinking," Marcus continued, his voice getting louder, "maybe we should have some music tonight. But not from a professional musician. That would be too easy, too boring." Elena was still in the dining room cleaning the last of the dishes. She could hear Marcus talking, but she was trying not to listen. She had learned that it was better to ignore him when he was showing off to his friends. "I have a better idea," Marcus said, his smile getting wider and meaner. "Why don't we ask the help to play for us?" The guests looked confused. "The help?" asked Mrs. Patterson, an older woman with too much jewelry. "Yes, the help. My maid, Elena." Marcus's voice was full of fake excitement. "She's been working so hard tonight. I think she deserves a chance to entertain us all." Some of the guests started to smile. They understood what Marcus was doing now. He was going to embarrass his maid for their amusement. "Oh, Marcus, you're terrible," Victoria giggled, covering her mouth with her hand. But her eyes were bright with excitement. She loved watching Marcus humiliate other people. "Elena," Marcus called loudly. "Come in here, please." Elena's hands stopped moving. She had been washing a wine glass, but now it felt heavy in her hands. She knew that tone in Marcus's voice. It meant trouble. "Elena!" Marcus called again, even louder this time. Elena dried her hands on her apron and walked slowly into the living room. All the guests were looking at her. She felt like a small animal surrounded by hunters. "Yes, Mr. Thornfield," Elena said quietly, keeping her eyes down. "Elena, my dear," Marcus said in a fake sweet voice. "My guests and I were just talking about music. You know how much I love my piano." Elena nodded, still not looking up. "Well, I thought it would be wonderful if you could play something for us. You know, to thank my guests for coming to dinner." Elena's heart started beating fast. She could feel her face getting hot. I don't play piano, Mr. Thornfield." "Oh, come now," Marcus laughed. "Everyone knows how to play a little something. Maybe Mary Had a Little Lamb, or Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." The guests started laughing. They thought Marcus was being very clever and funny. "I really don't know how to play," Elena said, her voice shaking a little. Marcus walked closer to her. His smile was still there, but his eyes were cold and mean. "Elena, I'm not asking you. I'm telling you. My guests want to hear some music, and you're going to play for them." Elena felt trapped. She looked around the room at all the faces staring at her. Some looked amused, some looked uncomfortable, but none of them were going to help her. "Sir, I really can't," Elena started to say. "Of course you can," Marcus interrupted. "How hard can it be? Just sit down and press some keys. Make some noise. We're not expecting Carnegie Hall quality here." The guests laughed again at Marcus's joke. Elena felt smaller and smaller. Victoria pulled out her phone and started recording. "This is going to be hilarious," she whispered to the woman sitting next to her. Several other guests took out their phones too. They wanted to record Elena's embarrassment to share with their friends later. "Come on, Elena," Marcus said, pointing to the piano bench. "Don't keep my guests waiting, they've been very patient." Elena walked very slowly toward the piano. Each step felt like it took forever. Her legs felt weak and shaky. The beautiful piano looked huge in front of her, like a black mountain she couldn't climb. She sat down on the piano bench. The guests moved closer, forming a circle around her. Elena could hear them whispering and giggling. She could see the phones pointed at her, ready to record her failure. "Now, Elena," Marcus said, standing right behind her. "Why don't you start? With something simple? How about Happy Birthday? Surely even you know that song." Elena's hands were shaking as she placed them on the piano keys. The keys felt cold under her fingers. She hadn't touched a piano in almost 3 years. For 3 years she had tried to forget this feeling, this connection between her heart and the music. But sitting here now with her fingers on the keys, everything came rushing back. She remembered her father's hands guiding hers when she was little. She remembered the first time she played a whole song without making a mistake. She remembered the feeling of the music flowing through her body like electricity. "We're waiting," Marcus said impatiently. Some of his guests were already looking bored. Elena closed her eyes for a moment. She could almost hear her father's voice. "Feel the music in your heart first, my little star, then let your fingers follow." But when she opened her eyes, she saw Marcus's mean smile and all the phone cameras pointed at her. She saw Victoria, laughing with her friends. She saw 30 rich people waiting to watch her fail. Elena pressed one key, then another. The notes came out weak and uncertain. She tried to play Happy Birthday like Marcus had suggested, but her fingers wouldn't work right. The notes sounded wrong, confused. "Oh my," Mrs. Patterson said loudly. "This is painful to listen to." "Make it stop." Someone else laughed. Elena's face was burning red now. She could feel tears starting to form in her eyes. She wanted to run away, to hide somewhere dark and quiet. But something else was happening inside Elena. As she sat at this beautiful piano, surrounded by these cruel people, she felt angry. She felt angry at Marcus for treating her like dirt. She felt angry at these rich people for thinking they were better than her. She felt angry at the world for taking away her music and her family. Most of all, she felt angry at herself for letting them make her feel small. Elena stopped playing the broken version of Happy Birthday. The room got quiet, except for a few whispers. "Is she finished already?" Marcus asked. That was even worse than I expected. But Elena wasn't finished. She was just beginning. She thought about her father, about the hours they spent together at their old piano. She thought about her mother, who used to cry happy tears when Elena played. She thought about all the dreams that had been stolen from her. Elena placed her hands back on the keys. But this time, something was different. This time she wasn't thinking about Marcus or his guests or their phones. This time she was thinking about the music. "Elena," Marcus said, getting impatient again. "If you're going to play, then play. Stop wasting our time." Elena took a deep breath. Her fingers found their positions on the keys. After 3 years of silence, after 3 years of pretending to be someone else, Elena was ready to remember who she really was. The guests were still talking and laughing, not paying much attention. They expected more bad music, more embarrassment to record and share. They had no idea what was about to happen. Elena's fingers moved to the keys, but instead of Happy Birthday or Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, she began to play something completely different. Something beautiful and complex and powerful. The first notes of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor filled the room. The talking stopped immediately. Marcus's smile disappeared from his face. The phones that had been recording Elena's embarrassment were now capturing something impossible. The maid was playing like a master. The first notes that came from the piano were not what anyone expected. They were soft and gentle, like a whisper in the wind. But there was something magical about them. Something that made everyone in the room stop talking and turn to look. Elena's fingers moved across the keys with perfect control. Each note was clear and beautiful. The melody started simple, but it was growing more complex with every second. This was not Happy Birthday. This was not a simple song that a maid might know. This was Chopin. Marcus felt his mouth fall open. He had expected Elena to make noise, to embarrass herself, to give his guests something to laugh about. But the sound coming from his piano was incredible. It was the kind of music he had heard in expensive concert halls. "What the hell?" Marcus whispered, but he couldn't finish his sentence. Victoria stopped recording on her phone. She was staring at Elena with confusion and shock. The other guests put their phones down too. Nobody was laughing anymore. Nobody was whispering or making jokes. The room was completely silent except for the piano. Elena's eyes were closed now. She wasn't thinking about the people watching her anymore. She wasn't thinking about being a maid or being humiliated. She was thinking about the music. She was remembering what it felt like to be a pianist. Her father had taught her this piece when she was 16 years old. "This is one of the most difficult pieces ever written," he had told her. "But you have the skill to play it. You have the heart to feel it." It had taken Elena months to learn all the notes. It had taken her years to understand the emotions behind the music. But now, sitting at Marcus's expensive piano, her fingers remembered everything. The melody became more powerful. Elena's hands moved faster across the keys. Her left hand played deep, strong notes while her right hand danced through the high notes like a bird flying through the sky. The music filled the huge living room and seemed to make the walls disappear. Mrs. Patterson, who had been laughing at Elena just minutes before, felt tears coming to her eyes. She had heard this piece performed by famous pianists in New York and London, but she had never heard it played with such emotion, such perfect technique. Mr. Johnson, the restaurant owner, was staring at Elena like he was seeing a ghost. He knew good music when he heard it. His restaurants always hired professional musicians for special events, but this maid was playing better than any musician he had ever hired. Elena's body moved with the music. Her shoulders swayed gently as her fingers flew across the keys. Years of training and practice had made this natural for her. Even after 3 years away from the piano, her body remembered how to move, how to feel the rhythm. The music got louder and more intense. This part of the piece was like a storm, full of power and emotion. Elena's fingers hit the keys with strength and precision. The sound filled every corner of the room and seemed to shake the windows. Marcus took a step backward. He felt like he was dreaming. This couldn't be real. His maid, the woman he paid minimum wage to clean his house, couldn't possibly play like this. This was master-level playing. This was concert hall quality. But it was real. Every note was perfect. Every phrase was beautiful. Elena was not just playing the notes correctly. She was making the piano sing. Victoria felt confused and angry. She didn't understand what was happening. Elena was supposed to be embarrassed. She was supposed to fail. That was the whole point. But instead, Elena was creating something beautiful, something that made Victoria feel small and stupid. Elena transitioned into the most difficult part of the piece. Her fingers moved so fast they were almost a blur. The melody twisted and turned through complicated patterns that would challenge even professional pianists. But Elena played it all perfectly. Some of the guests had never heard classical music before. They usually listened to popular songs or simple music, but Elena's playing was so powerful, so emotional, that they could feel it in their hearts even without understanding the technical skill involved. The music told a story. It spoke of love and loss, of dreams and disappointment, of beauty and sadness. Elena was pouring her whole life into this performance. Every note carried the pain of losing her father, the sadness of leaving music school, the loneliness of working as a maid. But the music also carried hope. It carried the memory of better times, the possibility of dreams coming true again. Marcus felt something strange happening in his chest. For the first time in years, he felt ashamed. He had tried to humiliate this woman. He had treated her like she was nothing. But she was clearly someone special, someone with incredible talent and skill. Elena's playing got softer now, moving into a gentle section of the piece. Her touch on the keys was so light, so delicate, that the notes seemed to float in the air. This part of the music was like a lullaby, peaceful and comforting. Several guests found themselves leaning forward, trying to catch every note. The music was so beautiful that they didn't want to miss a single sound. Elena's face was calm and peaceful as she played. For the first time in 3 years, she felt like herself again. She felt like the person she was meant to be. The music was flowing through her like water through a river, natural and unstoppable. Her father had always told her that music was a gift. "Not everyone can do what you do, Elena," he used to say. "When you play, you give people something beautiful. You help them feel things they can't express with words." Now Elena understood what he meant. She could see it in the faces of the people watching her. Even Marcus, who had been so cruel to her, looked different now. The mean smile was gone. The arrogance was gone. He looked confused and amazed. The piece was building to its climax now. Elena's hands moved with incredible speed and power. The music was like thunder, filling the room with dramatic, sweeping melodies. This was the part where the pianist had to show everything they had learned, all their skill and passion. Elena hit every note perfectly. Her years of training at Juilliard showed in every movement. She had studied with some of the best piano teachers in the world. She had practiced 8 hours a day for years. All of that knowledge and skill was still inside her, waiting to come out. The guests were completely mesmerized. Some had their mouths open in shock. Others had tears in their Eyes. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound in the room was the incredible music coming from Elena's fingers. Marcus felt like the world had turned upside down. Everything he thought he knew was wrong. Elena wasn't just a maid. She was an artist. She was talented in a way that his money could never buy. For the first time in his life, Marcus felt truly humbled. Elena began the final section of the piece. This part was both gentle and powerful, like a sunset after a storm. Her fingers caressed the keys with perfect control. Every note was exactly where it needed to be. The music spoke of acceptance, of finding peace after struggle. It was the perfect ending to an incredible performance. As Elena played the last few notes, the room seemed to hold its breath. The final chord rang out clear and strong, then slowly faded into silence. Elena kept her hands on the keys for a moment, her eyes still closed. She could hardly believe what had just happened. For 20 minutes she had forgotten about being a maid. She had forgotten about being poor and alone. She had been a musician again. Slowly, Elena opened her eyes and looked around the room. 30 people were staring at her in complete silence. Some had tears on their faces. Others looked shocked. All of them looked amazed. Marcus was standing right behind her, his face white with surprise. For several seconds, nobody moved or spoke. Then, suddenly the silence was broken by applause. The applause started slowly. One person began clapping, then another, then another. Soon the entire room was filled with the sound of hands clapping together. But this wasn't the polite applause that rich people gave at fancy parties. This was real applause, honest applause, the kind given to true artists. Elena sat at the piano bench feeling shocked by what had just happened. She had not planned to play Chopin. She had not planned to reveal her secret. But something inside her had taken control, and now there was no going back. Mrs. Patterson was the first to speak. "My dear girl," she said, walking toward Elena with tears in her eyes. "That was the most beautiful thing I have ever heard. Where did you learn to play like that?" Elena looked up at the older woman, then at all the faces staring at her. She felt scared and confused. These people had been laughing at her just minutes ago. Now they were looking at her like she was some kind of miracle. Elena started to say, but her voice came out as a whisper. Marcus was still standing behind the piano, his face pale and shocked. He couldn't understand what had just happened. The woman he had been treating like dirt for 6 months was clearly a trained musician. A very good trained musician. "How?" Marcus asked, his voice sounding strange. "How can you play like that?" Elena stood up from the piano bench on shaky legs. Her heart was beating fast. She felt like she had just run a long race. Playing after 3 years of not touching a piano had been exhausting, but also incredible. "Please," said Mr. Johnson, the restaurant owner, "tell us who you are." That was professional level playing. I know good music when I hear it. Elena looked around the room at all the expectant faces. These people wanted answers. They deserved answers after what they had just witnessed. "My name is Elena Rodriguez," she said quietly. "And I used to be a pianist." "Used to be?" asked Victoria, who was still holding her phone but had forgotten to record anything. Elena took a deep breath. It had been 3 years since she had told anyone about her past. 3 years since she had talked about music or her father or her dreams. But now, standing in this room full of strangers who had just heard her play, she felt like she had to tell the truth. "My father was Miguel Rodriguez," Elena said. "He was a classical pianist. Maybe some of you heard of him." Mrs. Patterson gasped and put her hand over her mouth. "Miguel Rodriguez? The Miguel Rodriguez who played with the New York Symphony?" Elena nodded. "Yes, he was my father. He taught me to play when I was very young." Several people in the room recognized the name now. Miguel Rodriguez had been a famous pianist in the 1990s and early 2000s. He had played in concert halls all over the world. "But Miguel Rodriguez died in a car accident years ago," said Mr. Johnson. "I remember reading about it in the newspaper." Elena felt tears starting to form in her eyes. "Yes, he died when I was 20. I was studying music at Juilliard at the time. Juilliard? Marcus said, his voice barely audible. Juilliard was one of the most famous music schools in the world. Only the best musicians were accepted there. I had to leave school when my father died, Elena continued. My mother got very sick with cancer soon after. I spent all my time and money taking care of her. I sold everything we had to pay for her medical bills. The room was completely quiet now. Everyone was listening to Elena's story with complete attention. When my mother died 2 years later, I had nothing left, Elena said, her voice getting stronger. No money, no family, no home. I had to find work to survive. I took any job I could get. Elena looked directly at Marcus. I became a maid because I needed money for food and rent. I stopped playing piano because it hurt too much to remember what I had lost. Marcus felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. For 6 months, he had been treating a former Juilliard student like she was worthless. He had been cruel to someone whose talent was beyond anything he could ever achieve. Why didn't you tell me? Marcus asked. Elena looked at him with sad eyes. Would it have mattered? Would you have treated me differently if you knew I could play piano? Marcus opened his mouth to answer, but no words came out. He knew the truth. He probably would have treated her the same way. Rich people like him didn't care about the talents of their employees. Besides, Elena continued, I wasn't that person anymore. I was just trying to survive. I thought my music was gone forever. Victoria felt uncomfortable and embarrassed. She had been recording Elena's humiliation on her phone. She had been laughing at someone who was clearly more talented than anyone in the room. Can you play something else? Asked a young man named David. He was a lawyer who loved classical music. I mean, if you want to, that was incredible. Elena looked back at the piano. She felt a strange feeling in her chest. For 3 years, she had avoided pianos. She had walked past music stores without looking in the windows. She had changed the radio station whenever classical music came on. But now, after playing Chopin, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt hungry for music. She wanted to play more. What would you like to hear? Elena asked. Anything, said Mrs. Patterson. Play anything you want. Elena sat back down at the piano bench. This time, she wasn't nervous. This time, she knew exactly what she wanted to play. She began Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. This piece was even more difficult than the Chopin. It required incredible technical skill and emotional depth. It was the kind of piece that only master pianists attempted, but Elena played it like she had been practicing it every day for years. The music was powerful and dramatic from the very beginning. Elena's hands moved across the keys with amazing speed and precision. The melody was so beautiful and emotional that several people in the room started crying. This piece reminded Elena of her father even more than the Chopin had. Miguel Rodriguez had made this concerto famous with his recordings. Elena had learned it by watching her father play it hundreds of times. As she played, Elena could almost feel her father sitting next to her on the piano bench. She could almost hear his voice encouraging her. Feel the music, my little star. Let it flow through you like water. The music filled the room and seemed to make everything else disappear. The expensive furniture, the fancy decorations, the rich people, none of it mattered when Elena was playing. The only thing that mattered was the music. Marcus sat down in a chair, feeling weak and confused. He had built his whole life around the idea that money was the most important thing. He believed that rich people were better than poor people, that success meant having expensive things. But listening to Elena play, he realized how wrong he had been. Elena had something that his money could never buy. She had talent, real talent. She had the ability to create beauty, to touch people's hearts, to make them feel things they had never felt before. Elena played for 30 minutes without stopping. She moved from one piece to another, each one more beautiful than the last. She played Bach and Mozart and Beethoven. She played pieces that most people had never heard of, and pieces that everyone recognized. Every note was perfect. Every phrase was emotional and meaningful. Elena was not just playing music. She was telling stories, painting pictures, sharing her soul with everyone in the room. By the time Elena finished playing, There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even Marcus, who hadn't cried since he was a child, felt tears on his cheeks. Elena sat at the piano for a moment, breathing heavily. Playing for so long after 3 years away from music had been exhausting, but it had also been the most wonderful feeling in the world. She looked around the room at the 30 people who had heard her play. They were all staring at her with amazement and respect. These were the same people who had been laughing at her an hour ago. "Elena," Marcus said quietly, "I need to ask you something." Elena turned to look at him. "Why are you working as a maid when you can play like that?" Helena looked at Marcus for a long moment before answering his question. She could see that he was genuinely confused, and maybe even sorry for how he had treated her. But 3 years of pain and struggle couldn't be erased by one evening of beautiful music. "You want to know why I'm working as a maid?" Elena asked, her voice steady but sad. "I'll tell you exactly why." She stood up from the piano bench and faced the room full of people. They were all waiting to hear her story, their faces full of curiosity and sympathy. "When my father died in that car accident, I thought the worst was over," Elena began. "I was wrong. That was just the beginning of everything falling apart." Elena walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Talking about her past was difficult, but she felt like these people deserved to know the truth after what they had witnessed. "I was in my second year at Juilliard when it happened. I was one of the top students in my class. My teachers said I had a real chance of becoming a concert pianist. I had already been accepted to perform with small orchestras. My future looked bright." Mrs. Patterson wiped tears from her eyes. She could imagine how devastating it must have been for a young musician to lose everything so suddenly. "But when my father died, everything changed," Elena continued. "My mother couldn't handle the grief. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped taking care of herself. 6 months later, the doctors found cancer in her lungs. Stage 4. Very advanced." Elena turned back to face the room. Her eyes were wet with tears, but her voice remained strong. "The doctors said she might have a year to live if we tried everything possible. Chemotherapy, radiation, experimental treatments. But none of it was covered by insurance. My parents had spent most of their savings on my music education." Marcus felt his stomach twist with guilt. He spent more money on wine in a month than most people earned in a year. He had never thought about what it would be like to choose between a loved one's life and financial ruin. "I left Juilliard immediately," Elena said. "I couldn't focus on music when my mother was dying. I got a job waiting tables to help pay for her treatments, but it wasn't enough. Nothing was enough." Elena's voice started to shake as she remembered those dark months. "I sold everything we had. My father's awards, his collection of rare sheet music, his precious violin. I sold my own piano, the one he had given me for my 18th birthday. I even sold my engagement ring." "You were engaged?" asked Victoria, surprised. "His name was James. He was a fellow music student at Juilliard. We had planned to get married after graduation." Elena smiled sadly. "But when my family lost everything, when I had to leave school and work as a waitress, he decided I wasn't good enough for him anymore. He found someone from a wealthy family instead." The room was completely silent. Everyone was absorbing the tragedy of Elena's story. "For 18 months I worked 3 jobs," Elena continued. "I waited tables during the day, cleaned offices at night, and gave piano lessons on weekends. I barely slept. I lost weight. My hands got rough and cut from cleaning chemicals, but I kept hoping the treatments would work." Elena paused and took a shaky breath. "They didn't work. My mother died on a Tuesday morning in March. I was holding her hand when it happened. The last thing she said to me was, 'Promise me you'll play music again someday.'" Several people in the room were crying openly. Now, even some of the men who usually tried to hide their emotions had tears in their eyes. "After the funeral, I discovered that we owed the hospital over $300,000, Elena said. "The medical bills had used up everything. I had to sell our house to pay part of the debt, but it still wasn't enough." Marcus felt like he couldn't breathe. $300,000 was nothing to him. He spent more than that on his last vacation. But for Elena, it had been impossible. "I declared bankruptcy," Elena said simply. "At 25 years old, I had no money, no family, no home, and no future. I also had no desire to play music anymore. Every time I heard piano music, I thought about my father's death and my mother's suffering. Music, which had once been the most beautiful thing in my life, became a source of pain." Elena walked back to the piano and gently touched the keys. "I moved from city to city, taking whatever work I could find. I cleaned hotel rooms, worked in fast food restaurants, stocked shelves in grocery stores. I never told anyone about my music background. It hurt too much to talk about." "How did you end up here?" asked Mr. Johnson gently. "I saw an advertisement for a maid position 6 months ago. The pay was better than my other jobs and I needed the money. I had no idea who Marcus Thornfield was or what kind of person he was." Elena looked directly at Marcus. "I quickly learned that my boss enjoyed making his employees feel small and worthless. But I needed the job, so I endured it. I told myself that this was just temporary, that somehow things would get better." Marcus felt ashamed. He remembered every cruel comment he had made to Elena, every time he had humiliated her in front of others. He had thought she was just an uneducated maid with no other options. He had never imagined she was hiding such incredible talent and education. "But tonight," Elena said, looking around the room, "when you made me sit at this piano to embarrass me, something inside me broke. I was tired of pretending to be someone I wasn't. I was tired of hiding my true self." Elena's voice got stronger and more confident. "So I played. I played like I haven't played in 3 years. I played for my father, who taught me that music is the most beautiful gift we can give to the world. I played for my mother, who made me promise to return to music someday. And I played for myself, to remember who I really am." The room was completely quiet for several minutes. Everyone was processing Elena's incredible story. Finally, Mrs. Patterson spoke up. "My dear, you have been through more tragedy than anyone should ever have to face. But your talent is still there. Your gift is still alive." "She's right," said David, the lawyer. "Elena, what you played tonight was extraordinary. You belong on stage, not cleaning houses." Several other guests nodded in agreement. Marcus stood up from his chair. He looked pale and shaken. "Elena, I don't know what to say. I've been treating you terribly, and I had no idea who you really were." "Would it have mattered?" Elena asked, again. "If you had known I was educated, if you had known I was talented, would you have treated me with respect?" Marcus opened his mouth to answer, but Elena continued. "The truth is, every person deserves to be treated with dignity, whether they're a concert pianist or a janitor. Talent doesn't make someone valuable. Being human makes them valuable." Elena's words hit Marcus like a punch to the chest. She was absolutely right. He had built his whole worldview around the idea that some people were worth more than others based on their wealth or status. But Elena had just shown him how wrong he was. "You're right," Marcus said quietly. "You're absolutely right, and I'm sorry." Victoria, who had been unusually quiet during Elena's story, finally spoke up. "Elena, I'm sorry too. We all are. We had no right to treat you the way we did." Elena nodded, accepting their apologies, but not completely trusting them yet. "What will you do now?" asked Mrs. Patterson. "Will you try to return to music?" Elena looked at the piano, then back at the faces staring at her. For the first time in 3 years, she felt a small spark of hope in her chest. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I've been away from music for so long. I don't know if it's possible to get back to where I was." "It's possible," said a voice from the back of the room. Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was Dr. Harrison, an older man who taught music at the local university. He had been quiet during most of the evening, but now he stepped forward. "Elena, I know who you are now," Dr. Harrison said. "I remember reading about Miguel Rodriguez's daughter when your father died. I also remember hearing you play at a student recital years ago. You were extraordinary then, and you're extraordinary now." Elena looked at the professor with surprise. "What you played tonight proves that your talent hasn't disappeared," Dr. Harrison continued. With some practice and preparation, you could absolutely return to professional performance. For the first time in years, Elena felt something that resembled hope. After Elena finished telling her story, the guests slowly began to leave. They shook her hand and told her how amazing her playing had been. Some gave her their business cards and asked her to contact them. Mrs. Patterson even invited Elena to play at her charity event next month, but Marcus barely noticed his guests leaving. He stood in his living room, staring at the piano, feeling like his whole world had been turned upside down. When the last guest had gone, Marcus asked Elena to stay. Victoria looked annoyed that Marcus wanted to talk to the help instead of her, but Marcus ignored his girlfriend's attitude. "Victoria, please go home," Marcus said. "I need to talk to Elena alone." "But Marcus," Victoria protested, "it's late. Can't this wait until tomorrow?" "No," Marcus said firmly. "It can't wait." Victoria left in a huff, slamming the door behind her. Marcus was glad she was gone. He needed to think clearly, and Victoria's shallow attitude would only make things worse. Elena was putting on her coat, getting ready to leave for her small apartment across town. "Elena, please wait," Marcus said. "I need to talk to you." Elena looked at him suspiciously. "What about Mr. Thornfield?" "First, please don't call me Mr. Thornfield anymore. Call me Marcus." He sat down heavily in his chair. "Second, I owe you an apology. A real apology." Elena remained standing, her coat half on. She wasn't sure if she could trust Marcus's sudden change in attitude. "I've been thinking about what you said," Marcus continued, "about how I would have treated you if I had known about your background. And you're right, I probably would have treated you the same way." Marcus looked around his expensive living room, at the paintings that cost more than most people's houses, at the furniture that he had bought just to impress others. "I've spent my whole life believing that money makes people valuable," Marcus said. "I thought that because I was rich, I was better than everyone else. I thought that people who worked for me were somehow less important than me." Elena listened, but didn't say anything. She had heard rich people apologize before, only to go back to their old behavior the next day. "But tonight you showed me something I had never understood," Marcus continued. "You showed me that real value, real worth, has nothing to do with money." Marcus stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights just as Elena had done earlier. "You have a gift that I could never buy, no matter how much money I have. You can create beauty. You can touch people's hearts. You can make them feel emotions they didn't even know they had." Elena finally sat down on the edge of a chair, still wearing her coat. "And what I have," Marcus continued, "what I thought made me so important is just money, numbers in a bank account. It doesn't make me a better person. It doesn't give me the ability to create anything meaningful." Marcus turned back to face Elena. "For 6 months I treated you like you were worthless. I made jokes at your expense. I tried to humiliate you in front of my friends, and all that time, you were someone with more talent and education than anyone in that room." Elena could see that Marcus was genuinely upset. His usual confidence was gone. He looked confused and lost. "But here's what really bothers me," Marcus said, his voice getting quieter. "It shouldn't matter that you went to Juilliard. It shouldn't matter that you can play piano like an angel. Even if you had no special talents, even if you really were just a maid with no education, I still should have treated you with respect." Elena felt surprised. She hadn't expected Marcus to understand this point. "Every person deserves dignity," Marcus continued. "Every person deserves kindness. I lost sight of that somewhere along the way." Marcus sat back down and put his head in his hands. "I don't know when I became such a cruel person," he said. "When I was young, I wasn't like this. I used to care about other people. But success and money changed me. They made me think I was better than everyone else." Elena watched Marcus struggle with these realizations. She could see that he was genuinely upset about his behavior. "Marcus," Elena said gently, "what are you going to do about it?" Marcus looked up at her. "I don't know. I want to change, but I don't know how. I've been acting this way for so long that I don't remember how to be a good person." Elena took off her coat and sat back in the chair. "Change is possible, but it's not easy. It requires action, not just words. What kind of action? Elena thought for a moment. How do you treat your other employees? Marcus felt his face get hot with embarrassment. Probably the same way I treated you. So you could start there. You could begin treating them with respect and kindness. Marcus nodded. You're right. I have 12 people working for me. Gardeners, housekeepers, a cook, a driver. I barely even know their names. Learning their names would be a good start, Elena said. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, thinking about all the people he had mistreated over the years. Elena, he said finally, I want to help you get back to music. I want to make up for how I've treated you. Elena shook her head. I don't want your charity, Marcus. It's not charity, Marcus said quickly. It's an investment. You have incredible talent. The world needs to hear you play. I've been away from music for 3 years, Elena said. I don't even know if I could perform professionally anymore. You played tonight like you had been practicing every day, Marcus said. Your talent is still there. It just needs to be polished a little. Elena looked at the piano. Playing tonight had felt like coming home after a long journey. She had forgotten how much she loved music, how much it meant to her. What are you suggesting? Elena asked. I have connections in the music world, Marcus said. I could arrange for you to audition with some orchestras or music venues. I could help you find a good agent. Elena felt tempted, but she was also scared. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough anymore? Then at least you'll know you tried, Marcus said. But I don't think you'll fail. I think you'll succeed beyond your wildest dreams. Elena was quiet for a long time, thinking about the possibilities. She thought about her father's words. Music is the most beautiful gift we can give to the world. She thought about her promise to her mother to return to music someday. There's something else, Marcus said. I want to pay off your medical debts. The money you still owe from your mother's treatment. Elena's eyes widened. Marcus, that's too much. I can't let you do that. Yes, you can, Marcus said. It's not a gift, it's justice. That debt has been hanging over your head for years, keeping you from moving forward with your life. You shouldn't have to carry that burden anymore. Elena felt tears coming to her eyes. The debt had been like a weight on her shoulders for so long. She sent money to the hospital every month, but it barely made a dent in what she owed. Why would you do that for me? Elena asked. Because it's the right thing to do, Marcus said. And because I want to prove that I can change. I want to prove that I can use my money for good instead of just showing off. Elena looked at Marcus carefully. She was trying to decide if she could trust this new version of him. If I accept your help, Elena said slowly, I want to do it the right way. I don't want handouts. I want to earn my way back to music. Agreed, Marcus said. We'll do this properly. You'll audition like any other musician. You'll succeed based on your talent, not because of my connections. Elena took a deep breath. For the first time in 3 years, she felt hope growing in her chest. Okay, she said. Let's try. Marcus smiled. A real smile, not the fake smile he usually wore. There's one more thing, Elena said. If we're going to do this, you need to promise me something. What? Promise me that you'll really change how you treat people. Not just me, but everyone. Your employees, your business partners, strangers on the street, everyone deserves kindness. Marcus nodded seriously. I promise. And if you see me falling back into my old ways, I want you to call me out on it. Elena smiled for the first time that evening. I will. As Elena finally left Marcus's mansion that night, she felt different than she had in years. She felt like, maybe, just maybe, her life was about to change for the better. And in his empty mansion, Marcus sat at his piano and gently pressed one key, listening to the note fade into silence. For the first time in his adult life, he felt like he might become a person he could actually respect. 3 weeks had passed since the dinner party that changed everything. Elena had quit her job as Marcus's maid, but not in anger or frustration. Instead, she had given her notice professionally, and Marcus had insisted on paying her 3 months' salary as severance. During those 3 weeks, Elena had been practicing piano every day. Marcus had arranged for her to use the music rooms at the local university during off hours. Dr. Harrison, the music professor who had recognized her at the party, had volunteered to help her prepare for auditions, but Elena was struggling. After 3 years away from serious music, her fingers were not as strong as they used to be. Her technique was still good, but it wasn't perfect. Some of the most difficult pieces that she used to play easily now challenged her. Worse than the physical challenges were the emotional ones. Every time Elena sat down to practice, she was flooded with memories of her father and mother. Sometimes the grief was so overwhelming that she had to stop playing and leave the room. Marcus, meanwhile, was having his own struggles. He was trying to change his behavior, but old habits were hard to break. Just the day before, he had caught himself being rude to his gardener and had to apologize. He was learning that becoming a better person was much harder than just deciding to change. On a rainy Thursday morning, Marcus called Elena. "How is the practicing going?" he asked. Elena sighed. "It's difficult, Marcus. Some days are better than others." Dr. Harrison mentioned that you might be ready for a small performance soon. There's a charity event next weekend at the Riverside Community Center. Mrs. Patterson is organizing it. She asked if you would consider playing. Elena felt her stomach twist with anxiety. "I don't know if I'm ready for that." "It's not a big event," Marcus said gently. "Maybe 50 people. It would be good practice before you audition for larger venues." Elena was quiet for a long moment. She knew Marcus was right. She needed to start performing again if she ever wanted to return to professional music. But the thought of playing in front of people again terrified her. "What if I make mistakes?" Elena asked. "Then you make mistakes," Marcus said. "But you won't know what you're capable of until you try." That afternoon, Elena met Marcus at a small cafe near the university. She was surprised to see how different he looked. He was wearing a simple sweater and jeans instead of his usual expensive suits. He looked more relaxed and approachable. "I've been thinking about your situation," Marcus said after they ordered coffee. "And I think you need more than just practice. Time." "What do you mean?" "You need confidence. You need to remember what it feels like to perform successfully." Marcus leaned forward. "I have an idea, but you might think it's crazy." Elena raised an eyebrow. "What kind of idea?" "I want to book you for a series of small performances. Coffee shops, bookstores, small venues, places where you can practice, performing without the pressure of a major audition." Elena frowned. "Marcus, I told you I don't want charity." "It's not charity," Marcus said quickly. "These venues would pay you. Not much, but something. And you would be helping them attract customers." Elena considered this. "You really think people would want to hear me play?" "Elena, I've heard you play. Trust me, people will want to hear you." Over the next hour, Marcus explained his plan. He would use his business connections to arrange performances at upscale venues around the city. Elena would build a reputation, gradually, gaining confidence and experience with each performance. "But there's one condition," Marcus said. "What?" "I want to be your manager. Temporarily. Just until you're established enough to get a professional agent." Elena looked at him, suspiciously. "Why would you want to do that?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Because I need to do something meaningful with my life," he said finally. "For years I've only cared about making money for myself. I want to use my skills and connections to help someone who really deserves success." Elena studied Marcus's face. She could see that he was being sincere. "What do you know about managing musicians?" she asked. Marcus smiled. "Nothing, but I know about business and I know about networking. I can learn the rest." Elena was hesitant. Working closely with Marcus meant trusting him completely. She wasn't sure she was ready for that. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Of course. Take all the time you need." 2 days later, Elena called Marcus with her answer. "I'll try it," she said, "but we do this as equals. You're not my boss and I'm not your employee. We're partners." "Agreed," Marcus said, feeling excited for the first time in months. Their first performance was scheduled for the following Saturday at a small coffee shop called the Blue Note. Marcus had convinced the owner to let Elena play during their busy afternoon hours. The week leading up to the performance was stressful for Elena. She practiced for hours every day, choosing pieces that she felt confident about. But as Saturday approached, her anxiety grew. "What if people don't like my music?" Elena asked Marcus on Friday night. "Then they don't like it," Marcus said. "But most people will love it, and the few who don't just have bad taste." Elena laughed despite her nervousness. Marcus was getting better at saying the right thing. Saturday afternoon arrived gray and drizzly. Elena stood outside the Blue Note looking through the window at the people inside. The coffee shop was busy, filled with people reading, studying, and chatting. "Ready?" Marcus asked, carrying Elena's music bag. Elena took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." They entered the coffee shop together. The owner, a friendly woman named Sarah, greeted them warmly. "We're so excited to have live music today," Sarah said. "We've never had anything like this before." Elena looked at the small piano in the corner of the cafe. It wasn't a fancy instrument, but it looked well maintained. "It's not a Steinway," Sarah said apologetically, "but it's tuned regularly." "It's perfect," Elena said, and she meant it. At exactly 2 p.m., Elena sat down at the piano. The coffee shop didn't have a stage, so she was sitting right in the middle of the room, surrounded by customers. For a moment, Elena felt overwhelmed. These people hadn't come to hear music. They had come for coffee and conversation. What if they were annoyed by her playing? Then Elena remembered her father's words. "Music is a gift, Elena. Give it freely and people will appreciate it." Elena began to play. She started with something gentle and familiar, a beautiful piece by Debussy that sounded like water flowing over stones. The piece was calming and peaceful, perfect for a coffee shop atmosphere. At first, people continued their conversations and activities. But gradually, Elena noticed that the room was getting quieter. People were starting to listen. By the time Elena finished the Debussy piece, the entire coffee shop was silent, except for her music. Every person in the room was paying attention. Elena felt a rush of confidence. She moved into a more complex piece by Bach, her fingers dancing across the keys with increasing assurance. A small crowd had gathered outside the coffee shop, drawn by the music floating through the windows. People pressed their faces against the glass, trying to see who was playing so beautifully. Elena played for 45 minutes, choosing a mix of classical pieces and some popular songs arranged for piano. With each piece, she felt more comfortable and confident. When she finished her last song, the coffee shop erupted in applause. People were standing up, clapping enthusiastically. Some were wiping tears from their eyes. "That was incredible," said a young woman who had been studying at a nearby table. "I've never heard anything so beautiful." An elderly man approached Elena as she stood up from the piano bench. "Young lady, you play like an angel. Where can I hear you perform again?" Elena looked at Marcus, who was beaming with pride and excitement. "We're working on scheduling more performances," Marcus said, handing the man a business card he had made just for this purpose. Over the next hour, 12 people gave Elena their contact information and asked to be notified about future performances. Sarah, the coffee shop owner, asked Elena to come back every Saturday. "You tripled my business today," Sarah said. "I've never seen the place so busy." As they walked to Marcus's car, Elena felt amazing. The performance had gone better than her wildest dreams. "You were right," Elena said to Marcus. "I needed this. I needed to remember what it feels like to share music with people." Marcus smiled. "This is just the beginning. Wait until you see what we can accomplish together." Over the next month, Marcus arranged 8 more performances for Elena. Each one was slightly larger and more prestigious than the last. She played at bookstores, art galleries, and upscale restaurants. Word about Elena's talent began to spread. through the city's cultural circles. People started seeking out her performances specifically. Some venues had to turn people away because there wasn't enough space. Marcus threw himself into his new role as Elena's manager with the same intensity he had once applied to making money. He learned about the music industry, studied other successful musicians' careers, and networked with people who could help Elena advance. But more importantly, Marcus was becoming a better person. Working with Elena, seeing her kindness and grace even after everything she had been through, inspired him to treat everyone in his life with more respect and compassion. Elena noticed the change in Marcus too. He was more patient, more thoughtful, and genuinely interested in other people's well-being. 6 months after that life-changing dinner party, Elena stood backstage at Lincoln Center in New York City. She wore a beautiful black concert dress that Marcus had insisted on buying for her. Her hair was styled elegantly, and her hands were steady despite the magnitude of what was about to happen. Tonight she would perform Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 with the New York Philharmonic Orchestra. It was the same piece she had played in Marcus's living room, but tonight she would share it with an audience of over 2,000 people. The journey to this moment had not been easy. After her successful series of small performances, Elena had auditioned for the City Symphony Orchestra. The audition had gone so well that the conductor immediately recommended her to his colleague at the New York Philharmonic. But Elena had faced many challenges along the way. There were days when her confidence faltered, when the pressure seemed too great. There were moments when she doubted whether she truly belonged on such prestigious stages. Marcus had been there through all of it. He had evolved from being her manager to being her closest friend and strongest supporter. He had learned the music business from the ground up, attending industry conferences and networking with agents, conductors, and other musicians. More importantly, Marcus had kept his promise to change how he treated people. He had transformed his relationship with all his employees, learning their names, asking about their families, and treating them with genuine respect and kindness. He had also broken up with Victoria, realizing that their relationship had been based on shallow values that no longer mattered to him. 5 minutes, Miss Rodriguez, called the stage manager. Elena took a deep breath and looked at herself in the mirror one last time. She thought about her father, who had taught her that music was the greatest gift she could give to the world. She thought about her mother, who had made her promise to return to music someday. Marcus appeared in the doorway of her dressing room. He looked nervous but excited. "How are you feeling?" he asked. Terrified and thrilled at the same time, Elena admitted. "That's exactly how you should feel," Marcus said with a smile. "It means this matters to you." Elena had invited several special guests to tonight's performance. Mrs. Patterson was sitting in the front row, along with Dr. Harrison from the university. Sarah from the Blue Note coffee shop was there too, amazed that the pianist who had performed in her small cafe was now playing at Lincoln Center. But the most important guest of all was sitting in the very front row. Elena's grandmother, Maria Rodriguez, had flown in from Mexico City to watch her granddaughter perform. At 85 years old, Maria had never been to New York before, but she wasn't going to miss this moment. Elena had used some of her recent earnings to bring her grandmother to New York and to pay for her own apartment. She was finally financially independent for the first time in years. The medical debt that had haunted Elena for so long was completely paid off. Marcus had quietly taken care of it, as he had promised. Elena had tried to refuse his help, but Marcus had convinced her that accepting it was not charity, it was justice. "Places, everyone," called the stage manager. Elena walked toward the stage, her heart pounding with excitement. As she approached the piano, she could see the vast audience filling the concert hall. The lights were dim, but she could make out hundreds of faces looking back at her expectantly. The conductor, Maestro Williams, smiled at Elena as she took her place at the beautiful concert grand piano. She had rehearsed with the orchestra several times over the past weeks, and she felt confident in their preparation. The orchestra began the opening of the concerto. The music was soft and mysterious at first, building anticipation for the piano's entrance. Elena sat perfectly still, counting measures and preparing for her moment. When the time came for her to begin playing, Elena placed her fingers on the keys and felt a sense of complete peace. This was where she belonged. This was who she was, meant to be. The first notes that came from the piano were perfect, clear, powerful, and filled with emotion. Elena played with the confidence of someone who had found her true calling after years of being lost. The audience was captivated from the very first phrase. Elena's technique was flawless, but more than that, her playing was deeply moving. She poured every experience of the past few years into her performance. The grief of losing her parents, the struggle of poverty, the kindness of unexpected friendship, and the joy of rediscovering her passion. Marcus sat in the audience, watching Elena perform with tears in his eyes. He thought about the night 6 months ago when he had tried to humiliate her by forcing her to play piano. Now she was performing that same instrument for one of the most prestigious orchestras in the world. But Marcus wasn't crying because of Elena's success. He was crying because watching her had taught him what it meant to live a meaningful life. Elena used her gifts to bring beauty into the world. She created moments of pure joy for everyone who heard her play. As Elena moved through the most challenging passages of the concerto, her grandmother Maria watched with pride and amazement. Maria remembered Elena as a little girl, sitting at her father's piano and dreaming of playing in great concert halls. Now that dream was reality. The second movement of the concerto was gentle and lyrical, like a beautiful song without words. Elena played with such delicate touch that the huge concert hall felt intimate and personal. Several people in the audience were moved to tears by the beauty of her playing. During the third movement, Elena's playing became powerful and dramatic. Her fingers flew across the keys with incredible speed and precision. The orchestra followed, her lead perfectly, creating a wall of sound that filled every corner of Lincoln Center. As the concerto built to its climactic ending, Elena felt completely alive. This was the feeling she had been missing for 3 years. This was the joy her father had taught her to find in music. The final chord rang out clear and strong, followed by a moment of perfect silence. Then the audience exploded into applause. 2,000 people rose to their feet, clapping and cheering with genuine enthusiasm. The applause went on for several minutes, with people calling out, "Bravo" and "Magnificent." Elena stood up from the piano bench, overwhelmed by the response. She had dreamed of this moment since she was a child, but the reality was even more beautiful than she had imagined. She bowed to the audience, then turned to acknowledge the orchestra. Maestro Williams shook her hand warmly and gestured for her to take another bow. The applause continued, growing even louder. Elena looked out into the audience and found her grandmother's face in the front row. Maria was crying and clapping, her face glowing with pride. Next to her, Marcus was applauding with a huge smile on his face. After taking several bows, Elena finally left the stage. But the audience wasn't finished. They continued clapping and calling for her to return. After a few minutes, Maestro Williams came backstage to get her. "They want an encore," he said with a grin. "I've rarely seen an audience respond like this to a debut performance." Elena returned to the stage and sat back down at the piano. The audience quieted immediately, eager to hear what she would play. Elena had not planned an encore, but she knew exactly what piece she wanted to perform. She began to play a simple, beautiful melody that her father had taught her when she was just 7 years old. It was a Spanish lullaby that her grandmother used to sing to her. The piece was much simpler than the concerto, but Elena played it with such tenderness and love that it moved the audience even more deeply. This was Elena's gift to her grandmother, to her parents' memory, and to everyone who had supported her journey back to music. When the lullaby ended, the silence in the concert hall lasted for several seconds. Then the applause began again, even warmer and more heartfelt than before. After the concert, Elena was surrounded by well-wishers backstage. Music critics, other musicians, and audience members all wanted to congratulate her and ask about future performances. "Miss Rodriguez," said a woman with a press badge, "I'm from Classical Music Today magazine. Your performance tonight was extraordinary. Can you tell us about your journey back to music?" Elena smiled. "It's been a long road, but I've learned that it's never too late to return to what you love. Sometimes life takes us away from our dreams, but If we're patient and persistent, we can find our way back. Several recording companies and concert halls had already approached Elena's new professional agent about future performances. It was clear that tonight had launched Elena into a successful career as a concert pianist. But the most important moment of the evening came when Elena finally made it through the crowd to her grandmother. "Mija," Maria said, using the Spanish word for my dear, "your father would be so proud. Your mother would be so happy." Elena hugged her grandmother tightly, both of them crying happy tears. "I kept my promise, abuela," Elena whispered. "I came." Back to music. Marcus waited patiently until Elena had finished talking with all her guests. When the crowd finally thinned out, he approached her. "So," Marcus said with a smile, "how does it feel to be a rising star?" Elena laughed. "It feels wonderful and terrifying and perfect all at the same time." "I have some news," Marcus said. 3 orchestras have already called wanting to book you for next season, and there's interest from a major recording label.